You're listening to the Holistic Spaces podcast with Angie Cho, episode 49, Organizing and Functional Spaces with Diane Lowy. Welcome to episode 49 of the Holistic Spaces podcast, where I hope to inspire, educate, and empower you to create your own holistic spaces that nurture and resonate with you. I'm Angie Cho. I'm a licensed architect, feng shui consultant, and founder of the Holistic Spaces podcast, blog, and online store selling beautiful and nourishing objects for living. As a reminder, we have just a couple days left on our giveaway, so if you leave a review on iTunes, you will be entered in a giveaway to receive a free mini consultation that will be aired on a podcast. And the last day for this is August 31st of 2017, so please take advantage of that. And if you enjoy the podcast, an easy way to show your gratitude is to visit our Patreon page. The website is www.patreon.com/holistic spaces. And we have a link to that on our Holistic Spaces podcast website. And there's a lot of different levels of support, as little as $1 a month. So that would be great if you can, if you're enjoying this, that you could just throw a little support to us. And also you can support us by sharing the podcast with others and, of course, leaving a review. You can also visit our website, holisticspaces.com. We have a lot of articles on feng shui and holistic living. And we also have a section on our blog called Q&A Sundays. You should read up on that, because they're very interesting questions. And if you have any of your own questions, you can always email us at info@holisticspaces.com. I personally read all the emails. And we do have a queue, but we try to get to almost all the questions if we can, if they're appropriate. So on to this episode. This episode, we're speaking with Diane Lowy from New York at Home. And Diane is a colleague in New York City, and she works to create spaces that are more enjoyable, more comfortable, and easier. She's not just an organizer, but she uses space planning, organizing, and repairs to transform the functionality of your home for a fraction of a cost if you don't have the money or time, or if it's a rental, to do a renovation, which is what I do. So it's very interesting, and I thought it was a wonderful conversation, especially there was a part where she talked about how people tend to have a lot of clutter around what they want to be and not who they are. So it's really interesting. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hi, Diane. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Angie. Thanks so much for inviting me. This is great.
So I'm really excited to have Diane Lowy from New York at Home on the podcast to talk about what she does, which, well, she'll tell us. Like, what do you do at New York at Home? And yeah, tell us about it.
So basically, we do what I call apartment functionality, which is basically a combination of home improvement, decluttering, home organizing, and small DIY projects to make your apartment work for you. And basically, our approach is that we work with our clients to sort of figure out their values and what's important to them and how they live their lives and what they do every day, and then sort of set up their apartment around that so that it functions for them.
Okay. So actually, so when you work with a client, like, you first interview them, or what's like your process?
Well, normally people call me and get in touch with me because they have a specific issue and there's some sort of reason that they're calling.
Like, for instance?
That they're moving in with a partner, or they've gone to a new apartment, or they've re-signed a lease and decided to stay for another couple of years.
Okay.
So, situations where people really feel like, I need to make this space work for me for a while. And so once they call me, then I'll work with them on what that specific issue is. So, like, let's say that they're moving, it's just sort of helping them unpack and figure out where the right spaces are to put the things that they already have. And sometimes that involves decluttering. Sometimes that involves just sort of thinking about what they use every day. And, there's everybody's different. So it's like a one size fits one solution for people's individual issues.
Okay. So it's not necessarily organizing. Well, it is organizing. It's organizing to make things more functional for you. Like,
Yeah, organizing is a side effect of it. But it's from the perspective that I come from, it's you become organized once by making your apartment functional. It needs to be organized, but it's not necessarily it's the end result is that you're organized, but that the approach is that you want to be able to. The reason why people want to organize is so that they have less friction from their day.
Yeah. So can you talk about that? Like, what are the benefits to having your home more functional and organized?
Well, like, let's say that you wake up late for work and you need to get showered and dressed and a little bit of coffee or something, and make sure that you don't leave anything behind, and you head out the door and you have only like 15 minutes to do that in. So if everything's in a place where you know exactly where it is, it's easy to find, you don't need to stress out, and you can still get that all done in 15 minutes. But if you have to wade through all of the things around those activities to be able to make that happen, it can take you twice as long, and you'll be late for work, and you'll be stressed out when you get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Actually, there was some article I saw recently where a lot of their list of successful people were talking about how they wear the same thing every day, and that to make their lives less stressful.
Yeah, and there's ways of sort of working around that. I think a lot of people, especially in New York, really enjoy the process of getting dressed in the morning. And, most people don't have cars here. And so the way that we express ourselves, and sort of show who we are to the world around us is through our clothing and sort of how we present ourselves. And so there's a lot of attention that people put on how they look in New York that's sort of different from a lot of other places maybe, and being able to have, that very few people sort of actually have that one outfit uniform that they wear every day. I think a lot of people get a lot of pleasure from being able to adjust how they look every day, and sort of as they grow and changing the way that they look. So and that's sort of the thing about working with individuals and what they want, is figuring out if dressing and expressing yourself is one of your values and part of who you are, then we can sort of set that up. And even in a 1-bedroom apartment, it's really easy to have an area where you can really play with getting ready in the morning.
So, well, that's good to know. So you don't have to just have one outfit. I've been wearing the same outfit, like different variations of the same outfit, for the last few weeks, like black pants and like a white shirt.
Oh, how has that been working out?
Well, I haven't been doing it on purpose because of that article, but I just because I think it's hot, and so a white shirt makes sense. And then black pants, because I just got some new black pants from Eileen Fisher, 3 different pairs. So I've been wearing those. Cool. But it's been good. It is pretty stress free, but I'm kind of like that type of person that wears the same thing every day. But I think also having your home functional and organized does create like a less stressful environment. Like I remember when I used to live with roommates and I was really messy, I would have like maybe piles of magazines around me. And I remember like purposely like just staying in bed so I wouldn't be able to see like all the piles of things on the floor. But every time I realized that every time I walked by them or saw them, or not even when I didn't see them, I'd feel really guilty or stressed out. Like, oh, there's that pile of magazines, which I'm going to read one day. Or there's like, I'm going to clean it up one day. And it creates like a subtle level of stress or like an active level of stress.
Yeah, because there's a lot of these things where you think about there's your idealized version of yourself. So I was working with somebody last week who had shrink wrapped in packages 3 different languages, like intros to 3 different languages, and it was like CD sets, so it had been from a while ago. and none of them were opened. And, but getting rid of them was pretty straightforward at that point because it had been a while. But it's also, that the feeling of like, oh, I'm the kind of person who's going to be able to speak Spanish before I go to Puerto Rico. It comes from a good place, but sometimes it doesn't serve us. It just makes you feel bad about yourself if you didn't actually follow up on it. So there's nothing wrong with getting rid of it. And when you're feeling like you are really ready to start taking Spanish classes, maybe you can do it in a different way with more of an accountability partner or something like that. But sometimes the things that we have in our apartments, they serve us for a while, and then they have done what they're supposed to do, and it's time to like let them go for somebody else.
But I think that's a huge thing when you talk about like, well, you probably have a really hard job in the sense that you just said that you start to see that idealized version of yourself. So then you maybe have to work with people who are seeing that they have this idealized version of themselves that they're not, that they can't match, or that it's not who they truly are. And so that's probably like a wake-up call to some people too, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I try and meet people where they are, and
it's not a bad thing.
No, it's really, it is a difficult job because it's all very intimate work. Like, how many people come into your apartment who you don't know, who are going to go through all of your drawers? Like, it's super intimate, and the boundaries can be sort of difficult. So making sure that people feel like safe and supported and not judged is really important. But getting back to sort of the idea of like things that, your idealized version of yourself versus your actual self, that part of the idea of having that little interview first about figuring out what people's values are and how they actually use their apartment, and having it set up around that basically you can go back to that list and then ask that question, like, does this intro to Urdu actually reflect who you are and your values and what you're actually doing in your apartment? Or is this some sort of like other thing that's not a priority for you right now? And maybe it's going to be a priority for you a year from now, but then you can just open that door and rearrange things and buy those, that language later. Tapes again. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good because it also helps people accept who they are as they truly are, and that it's perfectly okay to be who you truly are instead of that idealized person that never really existed anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is about like, I sometimes call it like being the Lorax for the space and for the person, because it's like feeling the space and letting the space be what it is. And part of what the space is the belongings of the person who lives there, and sort of having that, letting the person be themselves in a space that needs to be itself. So it's really, it's really interesting work, and it's people find it very helpful to have somebody sort of mirror back to them, like, well, this is what your space sort of wants to do.
And I remember I read in one of your newsletters that you said, or I think that was, or maybe it was on an Instagram or something, that if you thought about throwing it away 3 times, and you probably should.
Yeah, that was actually from from this book called Goodbye Things.
Okay.
That is this Japanese guy who's like way more minimal than anything I would recommend to any of my clients or myself. But yeah,
the Japanese ones are really intense.
Yeah.
but I just thought, but there was something, I don't know what it was, but I'm like, well, I thought about that. I was like, oh, well, Diane said, and I'm like, well, I know I've thought about it more than 3 times, so maybe I should just get rid of it.
Well, I used to do, make beaded necklaces, in the late 90s, and I have a box in my apartment of the beads that I used for that I've been meaning to get rid of for a while. And I actually took it out of the closet 2 months ago and put it sort of near the door to donate, and I still haven't done it. So it's all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's no judgments for anyone. No judgments on the listeners. It's just interesting because I think that's a really great way to think of it. If I've spent a lot of energy thinking like, should I throw it away? Should I not throw it away? Then I might as well just let it go. I was hoping you can also give us and the listeners some tips or some ways to approach making our homes more functional and organized?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Let's see. Well, I guess the most important thing is that a lot of people really love to just take action around organizing their apartments, and organizing the right places is probably the best thing you can do. Like investing your time in the spaces that you use every day is sort of, if I were to say there's one thing you should do, that's it. So like if you have boxes of old photos that you want to put in albums, that's not really a good use of your time. It's more a matter of taking the spaces that are at eye level, because those are the spaces that are really prime real estate, and figuring out, like basically clearing out anything that's in those spaces at eye level and only having things that you use on a daily basis in those storage areas. That can do a tremendous amount in terms of removing friction from your day. And, like we were talking about in the beginning, that feeling the reason a lot of people want to get organized is because they want to remove friction and misplacing things. So the stuff that you use every day, making sure that that's really easy to find, is the top thing you can do, and is time really well spent. Another thing that I like to recommend is the way people can organize their closets. A lot of people struggle with closet organization, and no matter how big your apartment is and your closets, if you have 2 clothing closets, then you can have one that's for your work, and then have another one that's for any sort of special events and things that you do on the weekends. Yeah, and then you can also do it so it's half and half. So one of the things I like to recommend is having 10 hangers per foot in the space that you use for work, and then bunching everything together for all of the other clothing. And if you're not really sure what the clothing is that you wear for work, basically anything you've worn to the office in the past month, you put in that half of the closet and start there and just sort of see how it goes. And if it starts getting too full and you're having difficulty finding things again, then do that little edit again.
Oh, that's a good idea. So that way you just have only a few things to choose from when you get ready to go to work.
Yeah, because you're tired and you're in a rush, and it's all the stuff that you want to have right there anyway.
That makes sense.
And
that would work for kids too, maybe like their school stuff, or if they have uniforms, to put it in one area.
Oh, and for kids especially, because kids really, having fewer choices for anybody is really helpful. But for children, especially if they're dressing themselves, having them have a couple of things to pick from just feels much better and is much easier for them. So that's actually something, when I help to organize children's clothes, sometimes it's a bit difficult because the parents, sometimes I'll notice that the kids have more clothing than the parents. And I'll talk to them about how we can kind of right size the closet to, because kids' clothes are so cute and everybody wants to give lots of presents, and, grandparents, and especially like there's a lot of people who really want to show their love through the clothing. And so a lot of kids in New York end up with a lot of clothing, and just making sure that you're editing so that there's no more than, as much as you could. If you did laundry once a month, there would not still be clothes in the closet, is a really good metric. I'll frequently see, especially with affluent kids in New York, that they have way more clothes than you could wear in 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And anything else, like maybe since this is almost it's around back to school time, so any back to school type of tips that you would have?
Yeah, I mean, well, making sure that you have places sort of organized by the door and cubbies for people, and having either a shelf. Sometimes, like if in the front hallway of a lot of apartments that you can have a small bookcase, maybe with 3 shelves, and then that's enough for each of the people in the house. And that keeping your backpack there and, your keys, or using a bin per person, and also having those sort of bins in either the living room so that people can have their things and have them contained within each of the spaces in the house. So if you're doing homework, that can be in the living room, as well as having the things that you need to take back to school in the foyer. Another thing that's really great to know is a lot of apartments in New York City have magnetic doors because they have fire doors. And so you can put finished homework on there, or, your kid, if they're doing their homework and they want you to check it, you can check it and then put it back there to make sure that people don't forget it in the morning.
Yeah, when I really don't want to forget to take something in the morning, I put it in front of the front door, so I can't leave without moving it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much. This is really helpful. I think I really love the tips, especially the one about the closet. That's a good one. What was the first one again that you said?
Oh, having things be in eye level.
Yeah, that's really important too, because that's what you see all the time. And then not focusing on things like the old photos, but focusing on stuff that really affects your life. Yeah, I think people do that like a lot in general, not just with their things, but they'll focus on something that's not relevant to their everyday life and then spend all their energy on that without like really working on something that can change things for them on a deeper level.
Yeah, I worked with a client a while ago who was really frustrated because she'd spent all of this money renovating her apartment, and the majority of the money that she'd spent renovating the apartment was on the kitchen, and she didn't cook at all.
Oh yeah. Well, you have to have a nice kitchen.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And can you just give everyone your website?
Oh yeah. Thanks so much for reminding me. So if you want to learn more about me, you can go to newyorkathome.com, and my Instagram account is New Yorker at Home, and you can there's a contact button, and I also have a weekly newsletter, so you can sign up for that too.
Yeah, that's where you can learn that if you thought about it 3 times. Was it in the newsletter?
Yeah, it
okay.
was.
All right.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you can definitely like check out her blog and Instagram, and the newsletter is really helpful, especially for great tips like that. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Holistic Spaces podcast. You can tune in on the 2nd and 4th Mondays of every month for a new podcast episode, and on the first day of every month for our astrology and feng shui mini-series. And it'll be really interesting. The one for September, I actually just recorded it, and be sure to check that out. So the astrology and feng shui for September will be with Samuel Reynolds. And then our next podcast episode is podcast number 50. Wow. And it's going to be with a good friend of mine, Magali Renee Hayes. And she just came out with a book called Kids Smart Spaces. So check it out. Episode 50 will be Kids Smart Spaces with Magali Renee Hayes. And if you like our podcast in this episode, please share this podcast with others. You can subscribe on iTunes. You can leave a review. You could also visit our Patreon page and support us for even just $1 a month. And if you'd like to explore the world of holistic spaces and feng shui on an even deeper level, I encourage you to visit our website, online store, and blog for more information about feng shui and holistic living. We have lots of stuff on there, information, blog posts, things that you purchase. And you can also submit any questions that we answer on Q&A Sundays and on future podcasts. And of course, we welcome any feedback and comments. Thank you so much for listening.